Right on. Okay. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us here. Last SGI Drive for Gold webinar of this calendar year. The last few months has gone quick, and lots more events coming up, and everyone's going to be busy, which is excellent here. So, yeah, thanks again for joining. So tonight, the basis of this really. What is kind of a unique situation from my standpoint personally. So basically was asked to play a little bit with some guys that I played with 4 years ago, and that was kind of the last point in time that I really kind of played a fair bit or a number of events or a season competitively, basically. A few fill-in events kind of here and there through those years in between, but was asked to again this year and decided to do that. And when I got thinking about it, I thought, well, this is a kind of a unique experience because, going from kind of nothing again to, pedal down for a few months in a short time to try and basically get to a point where we could compete at a really high level again. And again, for me personally, but for us as a team. And so, the interesting part of that is the situation where, old things come about, some things, some things you have to relearn. And then just, I thought tonight would be a good opportunity to kind of highlight some of those points or situations, issues, all of the above, basically, that just come to light from doing that, from trying to do that. I think, we, at one point in time, whether it be a coach or an athlete, that we will experience or have experienced or may not yet, but are getting to that kind of thing. So I thought this would be a pretty good opportunity, and so I tried to make some noteworthy points just from this year's experience. So I hopefully you can take something from that. I've divided them up into 4 categories. So we'll kind of share the screen. I won't be able to see you guys, but we've divided them up into 4 categories. So kind of practice and preparation, a little bit of the mental side, some event stuff, and then some game day stuff, basically. So I've tried to divide them up into those. I think tonight, certainly feel free to use the chat. I can check. It's a little more difficult to check when I'm sharing the screen, but I will keep a check on that after each section. But also, again, feel free if there's any points, anyone has any questions or comments, things to add. I think tonight, just feel free to take yourself off mute and feel free to ask directly as well. Totally fine with that. And if there is anything that way, happy to stop and discuss for sure. So with that. It wasn't planned, but I have exactly 25 points that I thought were worthy of writing down and certainly worthy of sharing. Some will be very direct and just the point, and others, I'll try and expand on kind of as is need be, basically, with respect to that. Okay, so all right, so the first area that I kind of wanted to talk to was practice and preparation, just in general terms. So number one, and maybe the most important, certainly you could argue that, and again, something certainly that I relearned just through this experience and having to try and get ready, in relatively short order to try and play good and compete as a team and myself individually as well, the importance of technical excellence. So what, this in my opinion should be first and foremost, almost always, if not always, really is, when you think about it, it's really the basis for everything else. It's going to be the basis for, almost all the other points, or a lot of the other points that we're actually going to touch on today. So important, obviously. I think it goes without saying, but I think sometimes some of the other points will make sense, just, starting with this one, and realizing just how important, each of us, teams, but each of us individually, the amount of time and effort, and the importance of chasing or striving for our own kind of technical excellence. And that may look different from person to person, but just how important that is. So really knowing yourself, having a plan in mind, making use of quality repetitions. There's some quantity there too, but quality repetitions with your practices. Obviously, true of different weights, true of different lines or paths across the sheet, and so on and so forth. And just, learning more about yourselves, feeling small differences in small adjustments and things of that nature when you're working on this. And I think the other thing to add is, don't forget, technical also applies to those of you that are sweepers as well, obviously, right? So that part of it as well, and just not to forget about that, because that also is very, very important, obviously, as well. So yeah, first and foremost, and maybe the most important of the whole bunch tonight, for sure. Second one, under the same category, the degree of intensity needed for technical practice and excellence. So perfect lead in from the last, and definitely joined with our point number one. So this is something I think we don't think about enough, in my opinion. I think that, a lot of people fall short on this, and I think, I know I personally was guilty of this, for a good part, or certainly earlier in my career, for sure. The layer that you need, I think, or I believe the layer of, or the extra layer that you need, of focus to really be able to make small adjustments, to be able to feel, to be able to repeat, something over and again, and know that you're doing that, right? The body, having the wherewithal and the body awareness, to do that from a technical standpoint. You need to, I think, focus harder or more than you do in a game situation. Game stuff comes a little bit easier. It comes a little more naturally for most people. So I would say, to make the gains you need, or to make the advancements technically that a person needs. And again, this would be true of throwing the rock, sweeping a rock, anything that, involves, proper mechanics and positioning and so on and so forth, and reproducibility. The degree of focus is more than most of us think, I think, to be able to make those gains and headway, and therefore make our practices, basically useful. And I think that starts obviously before you go to practice. Certainly it can be off ice as well, and there are, huge gains and things, that you can do completely off the ice as far as practice goes, just through, your own method of visualization, or just running through rehearsing, basically, as well. But I also think it's important after practice too. I think too often we are, you go, maybe you have so much time, you go throw, for instance, and then, you're running off to the next thing, whether it be, back to school or work, or, home, whatever the case may be, right? Without giving some of those things, a real chance to sink in, or, to really absorb what just happened during your practice, and allow your brain to kind of wrap around that, especially if there was something you were working on specifically, or changes that you made, or things of that nature. So just keep that in mind. I think that's important as well. I know it's interesting because early in my career, I had several years where kind of my running joke was, if I practiced really poorly before a big event, I felt good about the event, because usually that mean I would play better. And looking back now, it was probably just that I wasn't really focused enough during those practices, and that's why I probably practiced poorly, right? So, I think obviously important, and a huge aspect or part of our point one again, which is how important it is to be as technically proficient as you possibly can be. All right. So number 3 in this category that I had down here again, and use your time wisely. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory, and this would, I would say this would be important in a whole bunch of aspects. Preparation, obviously, and practice time, a big part of it. Again, we only have so much time. You only have so much time that you can be as focused as we just found out or discussed in the previous point, as you need to be to maximize what you get out of those times. So, and there's only so much you can work on at once as well, right? And there are a lot of different facets of our sport that when you get to a higher level and a higher level again, and so on and so forth, they all have to be pretty good. So yeah, so really important to obviously use time wisely. Okay, number 4. Again, practice quality with purpose on what you're achieving. So this, again, coaches, athletes, maybe a simple, straightforward purpose in mind. Maybe you're just you've made a change and you're just trying to cement that in, so to speak. Maybe it's more significant, right? But or trying something different, or working on a different strategy or game plan or whatnot as well. It can be a whole bunch of different things and cover a bunch more different things. But obviously, I think goes without saying, I can speak from the other point of view in a sense that when you're getting older, quality practice is really important, because the quantity can become very difficult all of a sudden. And I found that out a little bit this year as well. I was always a person that, later on in my career, realized how important it was to be as dialed in and focused as you could be during practices, but also quite enjoyed the quantity part as well. And this year I had to be very careful, because there were, I know, more than a few instances where, 16 rocks was way more than enough, if I wanted to carry on kind of in the next day or two kind of thing. So yeah, so again, multiple facets of this and reasons why it can be important, but certainly was worth noting for sure. Okay, number 5. Yeah, and again, pretty direct. Attack your weaknesses. So this is where you have to be honest with yourself. Again, as an individual, as a team, as a coach with a team, as a group, chatting things out, assessing and reassessing, and so on and so forth. It's fun to sometimes practice what we're good at, obviously, but some time has to be set aside for getting better at, obviously, at the things that we're not. And it seems pretty, elementary and simple and straightforward to say, or obvious to say, but doesn't always happen for sure. So just make sure that, some of the talks, the team talks, the individual kind of self-reflection is based on, what do I need to get better at, and go do it. And if you don't know how, ask for help, get help as needed, or if necessary, whether it be, again, a coach or someone outside your team, whatever the case may be, right? So very, very important. Okay, yeah, number 6. practice, although vital, is not the perfect substitute for games that matter. So I think what I was trying to get at with this is, it's great in practice to put something on the line, to play scenarios, those kinds of things I think are great. I think for a lot of us, it gets a little bit more out of certain practices, depending on what we may be working on, and maybe a little competition and things of that nature. But there is no substitute for games that matter. When you get in those moments, it's just different. It just is. So don't let the first time there's a real game pressure be the last time, I think would be the way I would want to put this, wrap this point up. You do what you can, you rehearse what you can, off ice, on ice, in practice, what have you. But those game moments are obviously important as well. Okay. And I think the last one we had here under practice and preparation was just a point on sweeping. So find out what works for you and proceed. And again, I mean, we're, lots of discussion with probably some of you, on here tonight, certainly, and whatnot, and still lots going on in the world of sweeping and theories and so on and so forth. But I think at the end of the day, you want to kind of have a plan, do your own homework and find out what works for you and your team and proceed from that. And again, don't forget, back to point one, don't forget the technical aspect of things with respect to sweeping as well, because if that's not continually improved on, probably a lot of your plan is going to be all for naught anyways as well. So again, back to point one, and there'll be a few times we mention that as well tonight, just based on how important the technical aspect is. So I'll stop there just for a second. Anybody have any questions at all on kind of our first little block of things under practice and preparation? And feel free to type, like I say, but happy if you unmute, if there's anyone that has anything. I'll just give you a minute if you have any comments or any things to add with respect to what we've mentioned so far. Okay, all good. So next, just a few points that I classified under mental aspect, for lack of better. So first one I have is perspective, and I think always an outlook of curling in the big picture with appreciation. Appreciation, I guess, and the passion for the journey and its benefits. So just having that big picture, really important. And again, seems, pretty simple, pretty simplistic, but I think that again becomes important again with some other aspects that we'll discuss as well. And it also becomes important, I think, again, depending on different levels that you are at as well. So, but I think irrespective of that, all of us really should keep that in the back of our mind, just that, the whole grand scheme of things, what we're doing and the work we're putting in and all the other benefits that we gain out of it, even results aside, obviously, and the enjoyment of that for sure. Okay, next one, life outside curling affects curling directly. So, yeah, I think this is important, obviously. And again, this would be all levels as well. It could be school, it could be job, relations, everything else really, that's outside of curling, right? So, again, it's about doing your best to kind of keep everything as ordered as possible, settled, accounted for, and happy outside of your curling, basically, because it will, sooner or later, it will affect the curling, and you want that to be as positive an effect as possible, because certainly that can work both ways. So just an important point I thought noteworthy to keep in mind as well. And then 10 is mindset. And so this one I have as pretty important as well. They're all important, but this one I would asterisk a little bit too. So, and what do I mean by playing your rocks? So it doesn't mean not taking into account opponent's strengths and weaknesses. I don't mean that, but basically, what I want you to think about is at some point narrowing your focus enough to basically play your rocks as a team, as an individual, as a team, the best you can. And simple as that. That's kind of what you control. And again, seems pretty simple to say. I mean, we all kind of know that, but I don't think we all really practice that all the time. I know I certainly didn't. But I think, I know for me anyways, when you kind of think of it that way, and especially, you look at certain events can be pretty daunting, when you start checking draws and who you play, and how many good teams you might have to beat to get to where you need to go. I think it's really a good skill to be able to kind of narrow in on this. And playing your rocks is everything that encompasses that, right? So it's the throwing of them, the sweeping, obviously the communication, the strategy involved and things like that. But again, when you look at it that way, I think when you narrow your focus as both an individual and a team, to that degree, I think you become instantly better at controlling the things that really are the only things you probably control anyway, at the end of the day. And suddenly, things that look to be, a long haul and difficult, may not look quite the same anymore, may for in a more positive light look a little more realistic or easier or whatnot. So just, I think an important one to keep in mind. I wanted to mention that too, because I know that's something that, definitely helped me, again, probably more in my latter years of my career is approaching it that way. I was always early on kind of a draw looker and looking ahead too far and those types of things. And that is a lot of kind of wasted energy, right? So, I think it also is a good avenue to help you stay a little more present and in the moment, again, individually and as a team, and probably a host of other advantages to that kind of mindset as well. So, questions about those at all? I think that's all I had for mental before we kind of move on to the next category. Okay, cool. Yeah, and feel free if there's anything that comes to mind later on, we can go back and revisit. So don't worry about that for sure. Okay, so next one I called kind of event, meaning a whole event, a larger event, and things of that nature, that I categorized in. So, point number 11, letting yourself have fun. So, I would say this is, important both on and off the ice. Kind of allows for mental breaks that are necessary and beneficial, as well as hopefully fun, right? So you have to enjoy this at the end of the day, right? And again, I think sometimes that can get lost in the shuffle a little bit. And that, that may be different things for different people, obviously. There's no doubt it will be, but I think an important point, again, of note, you need those times. You need to do that and enjoy your teammates and the experiences and things. There's a lot you can get out of an event, whether it be at your local club on a weekend or overseas internationally at a huge event, right? I mean, it really doesn't matter. I think the same rules should and could and should apply basically to all teams as well. So really important. Next one, enjoy the battles and grind. So kind of back to mental, enjoying the process of playing your rocks as best you can. And all that entails, as well as obviously the competition that ensues from that. You have to enjoy it. And yeah, there's going to be, there's going to be ups and downs. I think, when there's travel, when there's different personalities on a team, opponents, factors that you don't control, all that make events fun, but they all can also make it hard, right? And so, I think again, just you need to go into these things, wanting to do this and wanting to and ready to enjoy kind of all the work that you've hopefully put in in the practice and preparation side of things, just watching that kind of grow and develop and kind of see where that takes you when you get into events, whether it be the start of an event or the one that you really wanted to win to accomplish your goals as well. So just I think important to take note of for sure. Okay, 13, downtime at an event. So worth considering this. This is just about picking your team spots, basically. And what to consider actually during an event. So again, set aside some time for, maybe it's a little bit of fun or team building or something along those lines. The time when it's necessary to rest, the time when it's necessary to recover, which, might be two different things depending on what position you're playing, the mental recovery of a skip or the physical recovery, of somebody that's just swept every rock the past couple games, right? So important to keep in mind. Again, mindset, preparation, and a host of other things that again are worth considering, while you're at an event. So, just again making note of that and what you want and should be doing and kind of as well need to be doing scheduled during those events. Okay, 14, I would say, again, sleep importance. So yeah, really, really important. And again, reiterated to me this go around this year in playing, right? And I think the couple takeaway points here, this is important before events start, like days before an event starts. I don't mean, and obviously I do mean, but I don't mean just at an event. It's important during an event as well, obviously, but you should be thinking about this before an event. Hugely important. And the longer the event, arguably the more important it becomes, basically. So I know I was, again, early in my career, this was a huge negative for me. I'd work myself up enough that the brain wouldn't shut off, and there's nothing worse than going into an event, already like you've played two-thirds of it, exhausted or mentally tired already. So something I know I got better at as time went, something that I revisited and realized again just how important was this year, but was in a obviously a better position to deal with. And different people are different with this one. Some people, this may not be an issue whatsoever, and others, just depends on the person it may be, right? So I think, again, just the importance of realizing that, and doing what you need to enter things nice, well rested, and so on and so forth. Okay, yeah, point 15 I have. So pace of play. So again, I think noteworthy too, and what I want to talk about with this one, and this is true, I would say, obviously in timed events, right? But also in events that aren't timed. So, there's lots of events that we play that aren't timed. There's certainly, whether you're a junior or U18 or whatnot, there's going to be a host of events that aren't timed as well. But I think the takeaway here is, and what I've always noticed is, a lot of time is wasted. Maybe the most time is wasted in a team, just taking time to get ready to shoot, or to get ready to call. Certainly there's time wasted, discussing and strategizing and things. But I've always found so much time is wasted inefficiently, or with respect to just, not being ready to play, and just kind of that, almost that dead time of just, if you have the thought in the back of your mind that you want to keep a decent pace of play, instantly you gain a whole bunch more time. And so the takeaway I wanted to leave with you with this is to just kind of have that, recheck this as a team, and kind of have that thought in the back of your mind, or sometimes even as a bit of a goal. A back burner goal for your team is to keep an eye on and keep the pace of play going. And I know for me, almost always, that just led to better play. It just kind of went without saying. It didn't mean that we didn't make mistakes. Obviously things happen, but almost always was a better flow to a game, an end, a shot, whatever. And usually, or almost always, was just a better situation. So I just wanted to kind of, I thought we're a noteworthy point, and we don't often think about it when we're, maybe the majority of our events aren't timed, and we don't often necessarily think of it that way. But I think it's really important to do that. Then maybe even more important, to be honest, to do it in those moments, to just keep a check on that, and like I say, work on the efficiencies of and cleaning up those the amount of time that really doesn't need to be spent, that you're just wasting anyways. And so have a check on that as a team. So point 16, having a plan, sweeping strategy, et cetera, et cetera. This is really simply about doing your homework and have your team thoughts in mind. So, and again, we touched on the sweeping, obviously strategy, what what works for you, how you're going to approach certain things, and go with it. And then obviously assess and reassess, and do that often, as you go. But having some sort of a starting plan with these things, with everything, very, very important for sure. Doesn't mean you can't be flexible or need to be flexible, because that's also very true. But having that good basis for a starting point, hugely important. Yeah, number 17. So last point of this little section. And so this one again kind of came from this year as well a little bit, and I think important also. But know how your teammates are doing, whether it be coach, whether it be players in our case, and whatnot. So, and I think this applies. This would apply across the board, all people, all levels, all teams. Something worth checking in every so often. So I'm going to give you an example this year. I only ended up playing kind of 3 events with my guys, which isn't a lot to kind of get ready to play as good as we can, at a pretrial event, but it's all we kind of could do. So obviously there was a lot of work together and individually that went into doing, putting the pieces together as quickly as we possibly could. So cruising along in the pre-trials and playing pretty good. Everything's going well, and confidence is getting higher and higher and higher, and really feeling good about things kind of into the last day. And it is interesting because there's just so many little things, and even for me, so many little things that a person needs to be reminded of or relearn. And we get to our game, we're playing Glen Howard, and of course I'm worrying about getting myself ready and so on and so forth, and never really even dawned on me, kind of how big a game, put it this way, how big a game it was, I guess, and certainly, kind of for my three guys that are, significantly younger and are just kind of at the start of their career and so on and so forth, right? Obviously I've accomplished good things already and been in big games already, but that was a situation where I really probably should have needed to and checked in a little more with playing an end or two, kind of just to allow them to get the feet under a little bit and everyone comfortable, and I think there was a little bit of discomfort there, just whether it be nerves or whatnot. I know I always have that a little bit too, but certainly, in a good way. But that was an example of, something I could have done different that, I think would have helped a bunch on their behalf. As it turned out, of course, hindsight's always 2020, right? And so we kind of got right at it the first end and probably played, the worst end of our certainly our week. And I think a lot of it had to just do with, maybe needing to settle in a little bit. And so, that's on me. And that's a situation, a prime example of a situation where, keep a check on and sometimes we still will need to learn this the hard way. But always good to, more communication is better. And the beauty of team sports and sometimes the difficulty of team sports is, however many people, curling, we have 4 or, 5, if you got a fifth, the coach, another person. But those are different personalities. And so you really want to get to know each other as best you can and check in often, and don't take for granted on what may be on the outside always either, I guess would be the takeaway with that for sure. Okay, so that's the event stuff. So we got one more to go through, and it's more game related. Any thoughts or questions on the event section here?
Jim Wilson.
Hey, Jim.
How you doing? Number
Good,
12.
you?
What was that again?
Number 12?
Yeah.
Oh, enjoy the battles and grind.
Okay, so how do you think Rachel Holman is enjoying the battles of the grinds at the trials? What would they need to have do to got back on track?
Yeah, well, good question, right? I mean, sometimes it's just purely performance, but I would hope that, like in a case like theirs, and again, the trials is a perfect example, right? Because it's kind of, I mean, it's 4 years of work in a sense, right, for these teams. And so, I think that would boil down to some of the other points, to be honest. I think it's resetting and going back to, worrying about playing your stones as good as you can and having that perspective and that mindset. And I obviously I have no idea what discussions they would have had how things were handled, like no idea. But for me, it should have been, hoping that they felt really good technically going into that and confident going into that. And then just, talking about that and reiterating and just absolutely worrying about, playing and dealing with their rocks. What I saw from them, Jim, was a lot of, uncertainty and a bit of frustration with the ice early and just a lot of those types of things. And it's easy to kind of go down that path. And once you do, it's a slippery slope. And I think instead of that, it should have been just, the pure focus of again, their 8 rocks as best they can. And then again, and then again, and then again, right? I think that was the reset that I would have, I think liked to have seen from them in that case.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I'm just, it
Yeah.
should have been easier for them because they're winners.
Yep. And yeah, but at the same point in time, the nature of the event makes that hard too, right? Because there's a lot going on and a lot went into it, and that's where.
And they're expected to win.
Lots of expectations, lots of things behind the scenes going on with respect to drag certain ways and things, and definitely a favorite, right? Absolutely.
And that's kind of my point when you say enjoy the battles.
Yep. You do have to, right? And I think, you aren't going to win them all, but I think you've got to, again, have the perspective of knowing that there's potential to grow from every situation and to become better from every situation. And that's not I don't want that to sound like a cop out either. Because, certainly they had a job to do and had to try and do it to the best of their ability. But, I think they just went down a bit of a slippery slope the other way when things don't go well. I think you can rebound much quicker with, implying some of these points that we're talking about. Really, it comes down to that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you betcha. Anything else, guys? Awesome. Okay, so game time. So point number 18, the importance of routines. So yeah, again, this was extremely evident. Definitely reminded and reiterated this again with respect to the importance of routines for a host of different reasons. Obviously, for establishing a comfort zone, for having that predictability, both of yourself and everyone around you. Having that point of focus at all times, which is more and more important, I think, the more pressure there is as you go. That's kind of one of the things that you can lean on as that part of it grows as well. For reasons of, accomplishing all your roles on the team, hugely important. For control, for technical, for body awareness. Basically this is our base as an athlete. These are create kind of our foundation or our base. So again, just hugely important. And those, there's probably more reasons than what I just mentioned, but those would be some of the more important reasons for why this is important for sure. Okay, so when you've done all of the previous 18 points as best as you can, right? Point number 19 is trust yourself. So yeah, good preparation will and needs to allow you to trust what you're doing come game time. Again, hugely important, really, really important component of this, right? Don't do all 18 things that we talked about and not trust yourself, because it's all for naught. Okay, it's just like a slide, having perfect technique and you wreck it on the last, on the release part, right? I mean, that's, this is what you want to kind of, help finish off and keep everything together, basically. And along those lines, point number 20 is just a bit of a continuation. And it is trust what you see. So, yeah, believe what you're seeing and commit to that. This could be ice or rocks, and there may not be a magic formula when it comes to, ice or rocks that you see and things like that. Definitely, yeah, notice that. I noticed that this year actually too in our pre-trials. It was interesting. You experience a whole bunch of events and different things, but there's always something a little bit different or new, right? And here, in our pre-trials was no exception. We probably, as a team, had probably one of the best pre-competition practices that I've ever been a part of. And our practices before the games were really, really good, really good. Again, as good as I've been a part of, as far as kind of figuring stuff out and being dialed in and a good handle on things. And it was interesting because there were times throughout the week that we'd pick up little or see little things, pick up little things with respect to, it might be a rock, for example, that kind of didn't show up until second or third end of a game. And I'd never really seen that pattern as much before of that. And it took us a little bit to actually, trust some of that, just because it was, a little bit different than normal. Sometimes that may happen a little later in a game or later in a week, right? Over a long week, you might see, different properties kind of rear their faces later on in an event itself. So yeah, always something different. But again, if you've done your due diligence and whatnot, just, yeah, a point worth noting, trust what you see, because it's, yeah, if you're confident and comfortable and the technical part is there and you've done all these pieces, again, don't wreck it with not realizing that. The other side of that, though, is you also make sure you're honest with yourself too, right? Because if that part isn't a piece of the puzzle, isn't there, then it's a little more difficult for this to be to fruition as well. So important point, trust what you see. 21, the importance of proper weight selection. So I'm certainly a believer that there's the ideal weight for all shots. I mean, goes without saying for hits and taps and things, but I think even draws as well. And when you think about draws, you think about putting a rock in a spot, but there are different ways the rock can get there. So I'm a big believer that there's the best weight to make the shot the easiest in every single shot that we play. So I guess strive for kind of figuring this out, what those are. And if certain shots aren't in your team's or individual wheelhouse, then keep working on developing and getting better at those, so that then those shots can become easier for you. Yeah, so just really important point. Still see lots of teams, not, I guess, take this as much into consideration as could be, which eventually makes life a whole bunch easier. And it might be, what hit weight you throw. It might be, how much do you want the sweeper sweeping a tap, for instance, or thinking about how much you want a sweeper involved with all your shots versus, well, it's okay if I'm light, or it's okay to be a little heavy here, or whatever. So yeah, really important piece. I think teams and individuals that get better at, figuring out what that weight is and thinking about it, as part of their routine, will also find, oddly enough, that it becomes easier to actually, execute and throw that weight as well. So definitely an important one. Keep that in mind. Strategy with hammer. So I think this I put down, and I mean, this is a whole webinar or 2 or 3 in itself, obviously, and that's not the point of this point. I think the point of this point that I want to make mention of is, and we're talking more about, generally speaking, so in neutral ends or close games, things along those lines. The thought in mind that start with, figuring out how you're going to score and then go from there and build on that, basically. So I think the point I would say here is games are not won when you don't give up steals, but games are lost by giving up steals. So I think important point, make sure you can score for the most part. Again, generally speaking, make sure you can score, and then away you go and build on, doing better than that as part of your end plan, obviously. Okay, point 23, we're almost through here. Defense without hammer. So really notice this. This was, I would say, one of the small differences, I think, that, I really noticed this go around versus even 4 years ago. Obviously, the rule was in essence the same as far as 5 rock and things of that nature. But this one really hit home a little bit more, certainly this go around, I think, as the game has evolved a little bit even further. So defense, I guess the best way to put it is defensive opportunities, like if you're up in a game, they will present themselves, or often do present themselves. But boy, there's not many situations where you should be thinking about that or thinking that way early in the end, because that sure can get you into trouble. I think really need to have an offensive tone to most ends when you don't have last rock. And again, try and dictate where that end is going to be played as best you can. Because I think where trouble starts is thinking very defensively right off the bat. Obviously the exceptions are when you're maybe 4 up or obviously 4 up in the last end or way up in the middle of the game or something along those lines, probably different scenario. But yeah, just be careful with this one. Like, thinking defensively, without last rock is pretty dicey. So just again, just a note of that. And I certainly noticed that was fairly different, even in the kind of the 4 years that I wasn't playing there. Okay,
Just on that one, Pat, sorry.
Yeah.
What did you think about the new rule that they're implementing in the Worlds now? That it's, I believe, if your center guard is on the center line, you can't remove it.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting one, right? I think like the Slams have tried that a couple times as well. I think of the rules that they were talking about, that's one that I think might be okay. It rewards, precision from the lead. People are very good at that now, right? Almost to the point where, 2 ticks in the end is over. So it's interesting for sure. Obviously it's beneficial to the team that's down, and it's one of those rules that rewards, the fan, I guess, if you will, right? So there's always going to be different viewpoints on that, but I think that's one that at least rewards some execution and whatnot as well. So yeah, certainly make for much better or interesting finishes, and there may not be an end that's a foregone conclusion that otherwise might have been now. Yeah, so point 24, and these last two kind of go together a bit as well. So rotation, I'm talking about rotation on the rock, obviously, as you throw it. Rotation is your friend. So yeah, this is one that, again, early in my career, I didn't grasp. There weren't, I think in general, people threw less rotation. When I kind of first started into men's play and for a fair bit of time. And I know I was definitely one of them. I think for the most part, the ice and the rocks were definitely more conducive to that at that point in time. To the point where I think there was actually there was probably a number of years that it was helpful to me, because I could probably get curl and get to spots that other people couldn't individually. So however, I think that for the most part has changed, and I know that's something that I really had to work on this year. And when we talk about whatever point it was, attacking your weaknesses, well, that was one of my biggest ones. And so that's something that, in the very short time, I certainly worked on real hard to kind of get up to 3.5, 4-ish probably rotations on a consistent level or basis, without that feeling odd or strange when my 1.5 or 2 at the most the rest of my career was about what I gave it, right? So yeah, pretty important. Now I think the funny part about this, or the point I'll say about this, is I think one of the next steps of the game, kind of as far as where it's going to head, and maybe has kind of started to go that way already, is, people being really proficient at throwing different amounts of rotations depending on the shot they're playing. Maybe not even so much the ice that's in front of them or, the conditions, but actually even specific shots and where they are on the sheet and what weight they're throwing, things like that, right? I think that's probably coming. I think we're getting to that stage where, the people that are on the cutting edge are actually going to have to be good and really, really efficient at doing that. Because I think there's possibly some significant benefits to being able to do that. But I will say, though, it starts with being able to do one amount of rotation consistently well. And if you need to be able to do that first, obviously. So yeah, we're in a time now where, rotation is a good thing on the rock. And yes, there's probably an upper limit. I don't know what that is. But I think there is a limit where, if you go past that, you, in my opinion, really probably have to lose some of your feel. So you don't want to get close to that, but certainly it's important for sure. We're just learning more about this as we go, and what effects it has as well on the rock, and where it goes to as well. And the last one, kind of a continuation of the last point, rotation late in games is an even better friend. So yeah, and this was something, again, I put this down because this is something I learned the hard way too, even working through to be better and more consistent and so on and so forth. There were a couple of times late in games that, the minute you get a touch tentative with respect to this, that's when it's going to show up even more, when there's some wear, the ice is a little flatter just due to just gameplay, right, and usage. So to avoid, those flat little spots or little prints that are inevitable, doesn't matter how careful everyone is, little soft picks, down the sheet. Yeah, just make sure that if you need to, if you're a person that this doesn't come natural to, that you aren't tentative late in games, when it's a little easier to be when there's a little bit more pressure basically as well, right? So yeah, that was a huge point as well, and certainly goes with the previous for sure. So okay, so questions about those at all? Questions of anything else about the game time section, or anything else at all that we talked about at all? If you think of anything else, I don't see anything in the chat, but if you think of anything, feel free to reach out or email or whatever. Happy to chat with. But yeah, I hope there was a little insight there. Like I say, each one of these, especially this year, I came across basically, and like I say, it was a bit of a unique situation where you don't always get to relearn or have to relearn or revisit some of these things. And I think, in my situation this year, it was easier to bring to light some of these things just because, I went from 0 to 60 in no time flat here with it, right? So yeah, so appreciate you coming on tonight. Like I say, if anyone needs any recording or anything, I'm happy to send that out. And also happy to further discuss or comment or chat with you about any of these or all of these points for that matter. So otherwise, thanks again for everyone tuning in. We hope to see you in the new year. Best of luck with all your curling, and we will chat again soon. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.